Greece is bowing to pressure from the Chinese Communist Party, arresting activists who weren't even protesting. Is authoritarianism winning? Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. The Winter Olympics, everyone's second favorite Olympics. Beijing is due to host the Winter Games in February 2022, less than 4 months from now, making it the first city ever to host both the Summer and Winter Olympics. And it's going to be great. It's the first post-COVID Olympics that will have actual spectators, but only ones from mainland China. And it will have no real snow. And, hold on, I feel like there's something else I'm missing. Oh yeah, the genocide. Almost forgot about that. Just like the International Olympic Committee did. I know what you're thinking. It's an absolute outrage that the IOC would award the Winter Olympics to a country where the host city has no snow. But that's because almost no one else wanted to host the Winter Olympics. Norway, Sweden, Poland, and Ukraine all withdrew their hosting bids. What happened next? Take it away, 2015 Chris.
That left literally only Kazakhstan and China. Kazakhstan is a country with a president that's run unopposed since 1991. China has a president that doesn't need to run at all. So it became the choice between an authoritarian regime that violates human rights and an authoritarian regime that violates human rights and has snow.
And of course, the IOC chose the authoritarian regime that violates human rights and has no snow. I guess they were reassured by Beijing's promise to overcome the lack of snow. Beijing never breaks its promises, just ask Hong Kong. You know, back when I made that episode in 2015, 2022 seemed so far away. I missed that tie. But a lot has changed since 2015. Kazakhstan has a new president. I have a beard. And the world is more aware of the Chinese Communist Party's brutal authoritarianism. It's not just human rights groups. They're calling for a boycott of the Beijing Olympics. Politicians are too. Even the Washington Post sports columnist called for a boycott, warning that Western democracies that participate in the Beijing Olympics will only be helping to promote, finance, and propagandize their own destruction. Yeah, what she said. But unfortunately, Western democracies don't seem to be listening. A chilling example of how far a Western democracy will go to accommodate the Chinese regime happened earlier this week. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. Earlier this week, the Olympic torch-lighting ceremony for the 2022 Beijing Games was held in ancient Olympia, Greece. And during the ceremony, this happened.
Priestess Estiada comes to receive the flame from the bowl. Once the flame is in the bowl.
Concentrate on the flame and the bowl, people. Don't worry about the genocide thing. The flame is in the bowl. 3 protesters managed to get to the torch-lighting ceremony. They unfurled a Tibetan flag and a No Genocide Games banner as one of them yelled about the genocide of the Uyghurs. And then they were detained by Greek police. As of when we recorded this episode, they were still in police custody. In his speech after the protest, the IOC president said the Olympics must be respected as politically neutral ground. The Greek National Olympic Committee said it is disappointing that this traditional cultural event has been used by a few individuals for other purposes. What's worse? Interrupting a cultural event or holding the Olympics in a country that's committing genocide? Tough call. That wasn't the only Olympics protest in Greece this week. A Tibetan activist and a Hong Kong activist were arrested after hanging banners at the Acropolis in Athens. But the really chilling thing that happened wasn't Greek police detaining people who were protesting the Olympics. It was Greek police detaining people who were not protesting the Olympics. 4 Tibetan activists standing on the public sidewalk outside of the Olympic torch-lighting ceremony venue were detained by Greek police at the direction of Chinese officials. They were not engaged in any protest, nor wearing any political paraphernalia. After their release, we were able to speak with 2 of the Tibetan activists who were detained. The Olympic torch-lighting ceremony is held at the Temple of Hera, an archaeological tourist site. The 4 Tibetan activists were standing in the parking lot of the site when a Chinese embassy official told a Greek official to make them leave.
And one of the Greek authorities asked us, "What are you doing here?" And then we said, "We're here as observers. We just want to see what's going on." And she was satisfied with the answer and she walked away. And when she walked away, I turned around to see, and the Chinese officer made a beeline for her immediately and intercepted her. And I could overhear he was saying to her, "I'm here on behalf of the embassy. I would like you to tell them to leave." And I heard her response clearly. She said, "They're only here to observe, so I don't understand why I need to tell them to leave." And he said, they cannot stay here. At which point she said okay and came back and said, "You can't stand here."
The Greek official gave the 4 activists permission to stand on the public sidewalk across the street. But a group of Chinese officials started watching and taking photographs of them. Then the media started showing up to cover the torch-lighting ceremony. The activists gave some of the reporters flyers for a press conference they were holding the next day on boycotting the Olympics, including a Chinese reporter. The Chinese officials who were watching the activists took the flyer from the Chinese reporter, showed it to the Greek police, and brought the police over to question the activists. And then the police detained them.
Personally felt, and we strongly believe, that there was a very strong connection between the embassy, the Chinese personnel that were on site, and that they were the ones really calling a lot of the shots in determining how long we would be detained, where we would be detained, what would happen during the detention. While the Greek authorities were questioning us, actually about 5 or 10 feet away, there was those 2 undercover Chinese officials who had been taking photographs of us and coming behind us, and they were right just about 10 feet away when this was happening. So to us, it was very clear.
And when the Greek police took them to the police station, they didn't explain why.
Even during the detention, we didn't get any reason why we were there. One of us asked them why we were there. They said they don't have a reason. And when he insisted on them needing a reason because of the rule of law, they said that no, they're the police officers. Police can do whatever they want. They don't need a reason.
Remind me never to get arrested in Greece. Anyway, 4 hours later, the activists were released without charges after the Olympic torch-lighting ceremony was over. I'm sure that was just a coincidence. But for the activists, this wasn't just about their detention. It's about the Chinese Communist Party's influence over democratic countries.
The detention was not a malicious intent by the Greek government, but rather it was the pressure of the Chinese government to silence us. They didn't want us to have a space in this event anywhere, not even on the public sidewalk outside of the event. And that is exactly what the clash between authoritarian regimes and democracy looks like. And what we're fearful of, based on our experience today, is that the democratic side is not necessarily actually having any advantages. It seems like the authoritarian side at this time has more power to silence and to control the narrative. And so that's a big fear that we had today after our experience.
That's also a big fear that I have after their experience. By the way, after we spoke to them, 2 of the 4 activists were detained again by Greek police. Police stopped their car after they held a press conference in Athens on boycotting the Beijing Olympics. But why are governments like Greece and organizations like the IOC so accommodating to the authoritarian Chinese regime? More after the break. Welcome back. The International Olympic Committee is giving the 2022 Winter Olympics to a regime that is committing genocide. And that's just one of the Chinese Communist Party's many human rights violations. And it's not like the IOC doesn't know what's going on. Last year, they had a call with human rights organizations who were concerned about the Beijing Olympics. One of the activists told the IOC officials that she had missing relatives in Xinjiang. She said the IOC officials told her they were sorry to hear it, but the world is a complicated place. The IOC officials also defended the 2008 Beijing Olympics to the activists, by talking about how it improved Beijing's infrastructure and air quality. One of the activists on the call was Teng Biao, a Chinese human rights lawyer who was living in Beijing in 2008. He was detained and tortured ahead of the Olympics. Imagine telling a guy who was tortured to keep him quiet during the Olympics that, hey, at least Beijing's air quality is better. That's just one of many reasons we did an entire episode about how corrupt the IOC is on our other channel, America Uncovered. So the IOC is hopelessly in the pocket of the Chinese Communist Party. And Greece has also been a very willing partner for the Chinese regime. One of Greece's major ports has become what Chinese officials called a dragonhead for the Belt and Road Initiative. Back in 2017, Shelley visited that port for an episode on how China is infiltrating Greece. In return for Chinese economic investment, Greece also sided with China on political issues, like when they blocked an EU statement on China's human rights. The Chinese regime loved that. Relations between China and Greece have caused some controversy in the last few years, especially as NATO and the EU are increasingly worried about the Chinese Communist Party. Greece is a member of both NATO and the EU, but Greece says it will not abandon China, even though other countries are. It looks like Greece is determined to be a true friend to China. So what's the big deal with detaining a few Tibetan protesters, even if they weren't technically protesting? Anything for a friend. Meanwhile, activists are continuing to call for an Olympic boycott. And China has threatened to sanction any country that boycotts the Winter Olympics. But as I've said before, I think they're making a mistake. They should welcome an Olympic boycott. Look, only spectators from China will be allowed at the Olympics, right? Why not take it a step further? Only teams from China should be allowed to compete at the Olympics. That way, China wins all the medals. Think about it. Now it's time for me to answer a question from a fan who supports China Uncensored on Patreon or Locals. Blimpus asks on Locals, given that China has become so arrogant and belligerent, why are Western countries not rushing to reduce their dependence on China and still not officially recognizing the free and democratic country of Taiwan? Well, Blimpus, in a way, it's because China is so arrogant and belligerent. The Chinese Communist Party has successfully used psychological warfare against most of the world. It acts incredibly offended whenever anyone hurts the feelings of the Chinese people, including by recognizing Taiwan as a free and democratic country. And it threatens to go to war over Taiwan all the time. Now, most governments want to avoid war, so they get so afraid that the Chinese regime is going to carry out their threats that they try to do whatever they can to not offend China. Look at how often Western news headlines about Taiwan mention angering China. Anything anyone does to recognize Taiwan angers China. The Chinese Communist Party has conditioned the world to think about Taiwan issues in terms of angering China. You wouldn't think constantly throwing tantrums would work, but it does for the Chinese Communist Party. Until a country like, say, Lithuania decided to not play that game anymore. And shows that it's not afraid to anger China. Let's hope more countries follow Lithuania's example. Thanks for your question, Blimpus. And thanks for supporting China Uncensored on Locals. If you haven't checked out Locals yet, it's a community subscription platform where you can contribute to the show. And we have some fun extras on there, like Locals-only live streams. Locals is free to join, or you can become a paying member for more perks. Check it out, I'll put a link below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.